coming into the newsroom, Micron Technology reporting first quarter results. Adjusted revenue coming in at $13.64 billion. That's a 57% year-over-year increase. The estimate had been for $12.95, so a very big beat on adjusted revenue right there. You can see stock moving up in after hours. Adjusted earnings per share coming in at $4.78 versus $1.79 year-over-year. The estimate had been for $3.95, so again, another big beat on earnings per share for the company. Adjusted operating income coming in at $6.42 billion versus $2.39 year-over-year. The estimate had been for $5.37, so again, another big beat. Cash flow from operations at $8.41 billion. The estimate had been for $5.94 billion, so a lot of cash flowing there. R&D expenses coming in at just over $1 billion, $1.1 billion. So 32% year-over-year increase, and the estimate had been for 1.15. They actually spent 1.17. Adjusted operating expenses, $1.33 billion, up 27% year-over-year. The estimate had been for $1.34 billion, so a bit of a miss right there. Forecast, Micron sees second quarter adjusted revenue coming in at $18.3 billion to $19.1. The estimate was way down at $14.38 billion. And as we mentioned, shares are moving up with the big beat in after hours trading. Demand and supply shortages allowing the company to charge more for products. All right, let's take this to Dan Ives, Global Head of Tech Research at Wedbush Securities. Thanks for joining us, Dan. Let's talk about Micron. What have been the tailwinds for the company?
Look, it's at the center of the AI revolution, right? And I think if you look at these numbers, just further validates what we're seeing in terms of spending. Like demand and supply is 12 to 1. When you look at for NVIDIA chips and you look at across the sort of ecosystem from AMD to Micron to others, we're still in the early innings of this AI revolution, despite some of the nervousness.
Okay, so they're up 175% so far this year. Do you think the strength will continue into 2026?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, they're the Ives AI 30, one of our top names on the semi side going into next year. To me, like they're just hitting their stride, relative to where they play in the centerpiece of a lot of these AI build outs. But I think it's important to remember, like only 3% of U.S. companies have gone down the AI path. And you think globally it's less than 1%.
Got it. Okay, so a lot of room to grow. Let's get to Tesla for a moment. Shares reached a new high yesterday, and you say there could be a monster year ahead for Tesla. Is that on robocabs you're thinking?
Yeah, look, it's all about autonomous and robotics, right? I mean, that's really the key. But when you think about physical AI, the two best players are NVIDIA and Tesla. And I think, they're now going into just a massive chapter of growth when it comes to the autonomous world. Robotaxis, we expect to be in 30 cities, in 2026. Hey, look, and I think this is the key why you own Tesla. You own it for robotics. You own it for, what ultimately is Optimus. And I think you're just starting what's going to really be a historical year for Tesla, especially with Musk right now as wartime CEO.
How successful has the rollout been in Texas?
Look, we saw it firsthand. I mean, I think in Texas, it's been very successful. You've seen the geofence area expand pretty significantly. No safety driver, which is really important. And I think as that all plays out, that's going to be a model that we're going to see across other cities. And we talk about base case $600, bull case $800 for Tesla.
Okay, so how quickly do you think this could happen? If they're starting in Texas, they want to roll across the country, how soon could we start seeing some of these robocabs in the major city centers in the U.S.?
I think by the spring, you're going to see a number of them. I think, we talk about 30 cities, probably by the summer. 2026. And then I think you start that volume production of cyber cabs. Look, and that's really the key right now. If you look at Tesla, if I told you beginning of the year where numbers were going to be in terms of earnings and revenues, you would have thought the stock would be $250. The reason it is where it is, it's all about autonomous. This is the AI revolution now coming to Tesla. And I think it's just such an important time for Musk and Tesla as we go in 2026.
Dan, what about regulation state by state, which would be different and be perhaps hard to maneuver?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that's really going to be federal. I think similar to what we're seeing on some other areas, from executive orders from Trump, I think you're going to see more of a federal roadmap because that's important when you think about what's happening in China. I mean, in this AI arms race. So regulatory is going to be important. I think we start to see that early next year, call it. And this is something that's just so important for Tesla, just given if you think about it over the years, it's all been the build up to can you get to true autonomous? And that's, I think, where we are as we go in 2026 for Tesla.
How much of a market do you think Tesla can get in the robocab sector?
Look, I think globally, 75%. When you meant the global autonomous market. Look, China, obviously, you're going to have a lot more competition. But I think no one can match the scale and scope of what Tesla brings. And that's why we're so bullish in terms of what this means. We talk about $2 trillion as our base case, $3 trillion as our bull case. And I think it's important for everyone to understand, you'll have some white knuckle moments like we have this last few weeks in tech. We believe this tech bull market goes on for another 2 years, just given this fourth industrial revolution.
Let's talk about the other part of robotics. Robocabs are one. What about the other robotics? Where are they seeing progress? What do you see in 2026 on the robotics side?
Yeah, Optimus. Look, some would say that that's even going to be bigger than autonomous. And I think when it comes to what we're going to see coming out of the factories where you start that production, when you look at Optimus, that's going to be important on the consumer side as well as for factories, industrial production. And I think that's something where humanoid robots is something that is not 10 years out. It's not 5 years out. It's actually a lot closer. I think Tesla's going to play a huge role here.
And you see them being rolled out to do a warehouse kind of jobs?
I think that'll be one component. And then in the consumer household, you're going to see humanoid robotics in the next few years. I think you're going to see it play a big role in warehouses, from an industrial perspective, production, and I think it speaks to just this new world that we're seeing. But also, I think some of the worries are, does it take jobs away, and obviously some of the natural worries there. I think especially in the U.S., it's actually a net job creator. When you think about AI revolution, just given the innovation cycle overall that's coming to the U.S.
All right, let's talk about cars, right? They produce cars, and I'm wondering how more they will achieve in that market. They were pushed down in the start of the year, of course, with the sentiment against Elon Musk. But do you think there's more market share, or a lot more market share, for them to grab there?
I'd say stabilization would be the best way I could talk about. Now, look, Ford, GM, definitely pulling away, from that market a bit, just given what we see on EVs. And that's positive for Tesla as they go after market share. There's still brand issues in Europe. China, you're seeing an improvement there. So I would think about it like some net incremental market share. You also need to see rollouts of new vehicles. That's going to be very important for Tesla, especially in 2026. Look, that continues to be their core business. But when you look at the future, 60, 70% of future earnings will probably be autonomous and robotics.
So things are changing dramatically, you think, for Tesla next year. Dan Ives, got to leave it there, sir, but appreciate your time. Thank you.